This is our video for practice 3. In this video, we're going to go over how to sort data using a single criterion as well as multiple criteria. And then we're going to keep building on searching and using Excel formulas and functions, as well as practicing data organization by creating a frequency distribution table. We'll use frequency distribution tables for the next couple of weeks. This week, I just wanted you to be familiar with what they look like and how to make them. The following week, we're going to actually dive into why we make them and different types of calculations that we can make based off of frequency distribution tables. So we're going to start in the practice 3 sheet in our spreadsheet for activity 1. And the first task we have is to add a filter for the swim team fitness outcomes. So let's go to our spreadsheet. And we can see our data labels are listed here. So name, pull-ups, plank time, push-ups, right? And we can notice that we've got different swim team members and the number of pull-ups or push-ups or the amount of time they were able to hold a plank in seconds. Okay, so when we apply a filter, there's a couple of ways that we can do this. You want to highlight the data labels, okay, and we can, if we expand the window here, typically in this area over here, we have a sort and filter, right, and you can click filter. And we could also access custom sort through this area. Or we can go to data and the same functions are visible there as well. Okay, so since I'm already here, I'm just going to click filter and you'll see that these little drop down arrows pop up in the data. Okay. If I click anywhere within this data set, I can choose to organize my data in ascending or descending. So if I wanted to alphabetize my people from A to Z, I can click ascending and it will orient them if I want Z to A, right? So you can individually sort different rows or different columns based on a single criteria, right? But you'll notice that when I shifted plank time, the way that the name was sorted was changed. So I'll do it again. So let's say I wanted to organize pull-ups from whoever performed the most to whoever performed the least. You'll notice right now the filter is on plank time. As soon as I click descending under pull-ups, that filter goes away. And now I'm sorting based on pull-ups instead of plank time. Okay. So from here, if we want multiple criteria, we can use the custom sort function, which actually says sort. So if we were in the home page or the home tab, this would be, right, sort and filter, custom sort. If we wanted to clear a filter, there's also a clear option here, and we can take away any filtering that is going on in our data. Okay. So let's click somewhere in here, go back to the instructions, and we're going to sort data using multiple criteria. Okay, so the first criterion is that we're numbering or organizing our swim team members based on the number of pull-ups they could do, so listing people who did the least number of pull-ups to the most, right, small to large values, and then we're going to organize them based on push-ups. So again, click anywhere in your data set. We can go to custom sort, and then you'll see that it asks you to sort by. Okay, make sure that you have this box checked that your list has headers, and then we can choose what we're looking at, right? So we're going to sort first by pull-ups, smallest to largest, right? We're sorting on values, but if you click on this drop down menu, you can sort by different criterion, right? So you could do largest to smallest or have a custom list. And then we want to add, right, sort by pull-ups, smallest to largest, then by push-ups, again, smallest to largest. Okay, we can double check from here, pull-ups to push-ups, make sure that we have the correct sorting order, and then we can press OK. Right? And so this is helpful because we sorted by pull-ups first and noticed that there were duplicated values. And if we organize by push-ups, you can see people who have duplicated values, the person listed first is the person who performed the least number of push-ups, accompanied with that pull-up value. So sorting is really helpful when you have certain labels that you want to organize people by, or if you are trying to, say like I have left-handed people and right-handed people, and I want right-handed people sorted first, left-handed people sorted second. You can organize data in a various number of ways using filters. So it's a very useful tool. We're now going to create a simple frequency distribution for pull-ups by following the steps provided that I give you right now. Okay, so a simple frequency distribution is going to count from the minimum value to a maximum value, and pretty much we're just going to list numbers based on a certain interval. In this case, let's use the number 1. Okay. So we're going to do a distribution for pull-ups. So we're interested in this column here. Visually, we can see that our minimum value is 1 and our maximum value is 20. If we had a larger data set, we could use Excel functions, minimum and maximum. In this case, min and max are the functions. So if we wanted the minimum, we put min, and then you can see number, dot, 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 right, which is pretty similar to the average function that we used in the previous practice video. So instead of doing a single value, we can just highlight a cell range, and then we are able to find the minimum. Right? We can also do the same thing for max. Okay, so visually we can literally see minimum is 1 and maximum is 20 because we have them ordered by pull-up values already. But like I said, if you were in a larger data set, using min and max values is very, very, very valuable. Okay, so then we can create a frequency distribution. We'll do simple frequency distribution, just so we're going to make 2 distribution tables, so make it easy for us to figure out which one is which. And I'm going to make a numbered list from 1 to 20 with an interval of 1. So remember, when we make a list based on a pattern, we just need 2 numbers, and I can label all the way to 20. And now I want to know how many people accomplished each value of these pull-ups, right? So technically this is representing the number of pull-ups performed, and this column is going to represent the frequency at which that number of pull-ups was performed. So when we want to do a frequency based on a single criteria, which is the pull-up value, we can use a function called countIf. So if we do equals count if, right, you can see it pops up there. And then it asks us to present a range as well as a criteria. If you want to look this function up over here, right, we can build the formula using the formula builder toolbar, and it also describes down in this description area what the syntax means. So the range is the cells that you want to count that are not blank, so cells that have values in them, and the criteria is the condition that you're trying to meet. So in our case, I'm going to close this. We can do equals count if parentheses. The range is based on number of pull-ups, and then I could put a comma. You'll see then that the spot where we are in our formula shifts. And I want values that are equal to this cell. Okay, so if I click that cell, that is my criteria. And I press enter, and I notice that I have 2 people who were able to complete 1 pull-up, which if I reference that with my original data set, we have 1 pull-up achieved 2 times, or 1 pull-up achieved by 2 people. So from here, we can just copy this formula downwards to count in this range of cells. However, remember when we copy downwards, the row reference is going to change. We don't want that to change, therefore we need to use a fixed cell reference. So in this case, I want this blue range to stay the same. Because I'm copying downwards, that means that my row references are going to shift down. The red reference is fine, right? Because this would be indicating the criteria for counting each frequency. So that one we can leave alone. But the range we want to freeze in space. So we're going to add $signs in front of the row reference numbers. And then this is copyable, right? And we haven't had this set up yet, so I kind of want to show you 2 different ways. We can click and drag the way we have been. But there's another way that we can quickly copy information. If we have a predefined list of numbers that spread across a certain range of cells, when we hover over the little green box and the black plus sign shows up, you can also double click and it will autofill to the end range of the neighboring column. So that's something we haven't done yet. But we can see the frequencies that occur for each of these number of pull-ups that are accomplished. And if we cross-reference any of these values, we can see that things add up. Okay. Again, it's a good habit to just randomly double-click on a copied cell that you copied your formula into to make sure that your range is where you want it to be, and the reference for the criteria is also what you want it to be. So this is creating a simple frequency distribution. And we can use these distributions for a lot of things that we'll cover next week. The next thing we're going to do is create a grouped frequency distribution for Planck time. And similarly, we need to find a minimum and a maximum. Okay, so for this, let's say we already have our min and max formulas, so we can simply go from here, copy across, and that would change our column reference to where we want it. So I can double click and you can see the range that is calculated. Let's say that we want to create groups based on intervals of 5. So we'll call this our grouped frequency distribution. I want to make it pretty. And then over here we'll have Planck time. And then actually, let's label it this way. We're going to say lower, upper, frequency. Because for a grouped frequency distribution, you're going to have a low end of an interval and an upper end of an interval, so you have created a group between two values, pretty much. So let's say we want to do intervals of 5, so the closest multiple of 5 that lands, or that includes 38, would be 35. And then we can go to 40. And then pretty much we can create a numbered list based on intervals of 5 that goes up to our maximum value of 105. Okay, so if I say 45, and I want to go all the way to 105, and then this one I can say 35 to 40, and then I can auto copy down. So now I've created groups that span an interval of 5 seconds for Planck time. And then I want to see what the frequency is that exists between each of these intervals. Okay, I randomly chose 5. We could have made it intervals of 10 seconds if we wanted to group people with larger gaps of time. Okay, so it really doesn't matter. This is just for the sake of the example. When we want to find the frequency to a grouped frequency distribution, we are looking to see how many values land between the lower bound and the upper bound. So we now have 2 criteria instead of 1. So when we have 1 criteria, we use a COUNTIF function. When we have multiple criteria, we use a COUNTIFs function. So we can say equals COUNTIFs with an S. And then you can see in the syntax that we are asked to specify a range. In this case, we're looking at Planck times, so we can highlight our Planck time data, put a comma, and now it's asking for criteria 1. Rule of thumb for our class is that the lower bound is inclusive while the upper bound is exclusive. What does that mean? Okay, if you notice, values are listed twice, right? 40 is both an upper bound and a lower bound for adjacent intervals. So if we included 40 as both an upper and a lower bound, and somebody scored a 40 seconds or was able to hold a Planck for 40 seconds, they would technically be counted twice. So we include the lower bound, exclude the upper bound. So for our inclusive criteria, this is less than or equal to or greater than or equal to type notations. Okay, so we want things that are greater than or equal to the lower bound, but exclusive or less than the upper bound. So the way that we notate it in Excel is we have to put a quotation mark. We say greater than or equal to, and our cell reference, which is 35. So this is criteria 1. We want values that are greater than or equal to 35, and our criteria 2 meets the same range, but is looking at values that are less than and our upper value or upper bound value of 40. Okay, so then we're only counting people who meet this criteria 1 time. Okay, we can press enter and we see that we have a frequency of 1, which is true, right? If we look at the person who scored a 38 and then the next highest score after that is a 47, right? Now if I want to copy this downwards, you guessed it, rows are going to shift, which means I need to freeze my cell ranges. So we need to fix this formula before we can copy it. And what we're interested in freezing is the blue range, so we can focus on these blue numbers here. Okay, and I want to freeze the row, so I can just put a $sign in front of each of the row references for the ranges. Criteria I can leave the same because those are going to shift as each interval proceeds, right? So we can press enter, and then we can calculate the frequency that occurs for each of our time points. Okay. One thing to note is that the final category should be exclusive for the upper bound, right? Because this is like the final number, so it's not being repeated twice. So for this one, instead of greater than, we can just say greater than, or not greater than. Instead of just less than, we can say less than or equal to, because that's kind of the end of our data set. And now we've included the two people that held their planks for 105 seconds. Okay, so the first value and the last value should be inclusive if those mark the ends of your distribution, right? Everything in between for the upper bound should be exclusive. All of the lower bound should be inclusive. And that's how you create a grouped frequency distribution. So from here, you guys can answer questions in the answer sheet related to this practice set. I put some helpful tips in here if you need them. Pretty much kind of where to find certain bits of information, but that should get you going, and I'll see you in the next video.